Welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here with us. If you've ever felt kinda intimidated by the whole idea of alternative operating systems, or maybe you've heard a bunch of technical jargon thrown around and just wondered how it all fits together, well, you are in the exact right place. Today, our mission is to break down the entire, seemingly complex Linux ecosystem into simple, familiar building blocks. We're going to totally demystify this tech, taking it all the way from the bare metal of your hardware straight up to the beautiful desktop you click on every single day. But first, we really have to ask the big question, right? What even is Linux? You see, right now, a lot of us are facing a very real countdown. Windows 10 support is officially dropping later this year. And if you're unable, or maybe just unwilling to upgrade to Windows 11 because of those notoriously strict hardware limits, you've probably seen the articles, you've heard the tech gurus giving you that one intimidating piece of advice. Hey, just switch to Linux. But for someone who's never had direct contact with it, that suggestion brings up a ton of questions. Is it an operating system? Is it an app? And seriously, what is up with all the different versions? Well, don't worry, because it's actually much easier to grasp than you might think.
So here's our blueprint for today. We're going to cover 1. The Windows dilemma. 2. The Linux kernel explained. 3. Shells and the GNU system. 4. Choosing a desktop environment. And 5. Linux distributions made simple. Let's jump right in.
Starting off with Section 1, the Windows dilemma.
Now, for so many people, the massive frustration of forced hardware upgrades is exactly what leads them to seek alternatives. You know the feeling. You have a perfectly good computer, it runs totally fine, but suddenly you're told it's obsolete. That highly relatable frustration is exactly why switching to Linux is offered as a solution so often. It literally breathes new life into older hardware. But before we look at how it does that, we need to shatter a common myth right out of the gate. Linux is not actually a complete operating system. Unlike Windows or macOS, which come as these big, single, monolithic products right out of the box, Linux isn't a complete package on its own. When people say Linux, they're actually just using a shorthand. It's really just one puzzle piece. A super important piece for sure, but still just one part of the whole shebang.
Which brings us nicely to Section 2, the Linux kernel explained.
So if Linux isn't the whole operating system, what exactly is it? Well, Linux is a kernel. The kernel is the absolute core of an operating system. It takes direct control of your physical hardware, your processor, your memory, your graphics card. You can basically think of the kernel as the literal engine of the machine. It sits quietly under the hood and does all the heavy lifting behind the scenes. Because think about it, without an engine, your car is just a heavy metal box, right? And without a kernel, your computer is really just expensive glass and silicon.
Let's actually walk through exactly how your computer wakes up and seamlessly hands control over to this Linux kernel. Step 1, when you hit that power button, your computer's BIOS or UEFI initializes the hardware. Step 2, it then finds a tiny little program called a bootloader sitting right at the beginning of your main drive. And step 3, that bootloader's sole purpose in life is to load the Linux kernel directly into your system's memory. Once that happens, the UEFI's job is completely done, and Linux now has full, absolute control over your hardware.
Moving right along to Section 3, Shells and the GNU system.
Okay, so right now we have a kernel loaded into memory controlling the hardware, but it's completely invisible to you, the user. We need wiring and plumbing to actually make this digital house livable so we can interact with it. To do that, most free and open source Linux operating systems are built on top of the GNU system. GNU is an abbreviation for GNU's Not Unix. I know, it's a recursive, kind of intimidating acronym, but don't let it scare you. Simply put, GNU is just a collection of small, foundational programs used to interact with the kernel. It's the absolutely crucial tool set we use to build on top of our bare metal foundation, which allows us to build programs from code and actually tell the kernel what to do.
Now, one of the most important programs in that entire GNU toolset is the shell, specifically bash, which stands for the Born Again shell. This is the tool most Linux versions use to process the commands you type into a command line. It's your direct line of communication to the computer. And hey, here's a super surprising fun fact for you. Did you know that macOS natively uses bash for its command line too? Yep, the tools you use to talk to a Linux kernel are actually incredibly common.
And I think this brilliantly illustrates that shells aren't just locked away in isolated little silos. macOS uses bash, Microsoft's PowerShell can actually run on Linux, and bash can run on Windows. It really shows just how deeply interconnected the tech world is. You aren't learning some isolated alien language when you learn about Linux, you are learning the universal wiring of modern computing.
All right, let's head into Section 4, choosing a desktop environment.
So we've got our engine and we've got our wiring. Now, it's time for the interior design of our house. The paint, the furniture, the windows. The part you actually look at and click on every single day. We call this the desktop environment. Think of it as a graphical shell. Instead of typing out text commands, a desktop environment comes bundled with design libraries, smooth animations, and visual tools to give you a true modern desktop experience. Now, let's demystify a really core difference here. Windows and Mac generally force one specific look on you, right? You get the Windows taskbar or you get the Mac dock, period. But Linux? Linux lets you easily swap out the entire visual interface. You can literally choose the interior design that perfectly matches your personal taste.
Let's compare the two heavyweights in this space, GNOME and KDE Plasma. GNOME, and yes, the G is pronounced on purpose, takes a vastly different design approach. There's no traditional taskbar. It relies heavily on workspaces and neatly hides elements away to keep your focus strictly on what you're currently doing. On the other hand, KDE Plasma is totally perfect for those seeking a comforting, familiar layout. It utilizes a traditional computing experience, it's highly customizable right out of the box, and honestly, it feels a whole lot like the Windows layout you might already be used to. But you absolutely aren't limited to just those two. Just look at this immense variety of visual flavors out there. You've got Cinnamon, XFCE, Pantheon, Budgie, Deepin, or even tiling window managers that cleverly split your screen into geometric areas instead of using floating windows. This just reinforces the beauty of this ecosystem. Your screen can look and function exactly how you want it to.
And that leads us to our final section, Section 5, Linux distributions made simple.
We've talked about a lot of puzzle pieces today. The kernel, GNU tools, desktop environments. But how do you actually get them on your computer? Well, you get them through a distribution, or just a distro for short. A distro is a ready-to-use bundle containing the Linux kernel, the bootloader, the GNU tools, and a desktop environment. Simply put, a distro is the neatly packaged box containing all those distinct puzzle pieces we just finished discussing, fully pre-assembled for you so you can install it easily. But you might be wondering, why are there so many different distros? Well, different groups bundle the puzzle pieces with entirely different philosophies. On one side, you have the bleeding-edge distros, like Arch or Fedora. They want to ship the absolute newest apps and kernels to you as fast as humanly possible. On the other side, you have thorough testing distros like Debian. Their philosophy is a static approach, strictly focused on unbreakable reliability. They might not have the flashy newest features today, but they are so extensively tested that they basically never break. But here is the absolute crucial takeaway for today. For the average user, the desktop environment is what matters most. All that complex underlying tech, whether you are using a bleeding-edge Fedora base or a thoroughly tested Debian base, honestly, it just fades away into the background. The visual interface you choose is what truly dictates your daily experience. If you use the GNOME desktop environment on Ubuntu, it's going to look and feel almost identical to the GNOME desktop environment on Fedora. And I really want to completely reassure you on this. Daily usage of a modern Linux system feels exactly like what you are already used to. It requires absolutely zero command line magic. You install software visually via an app store just like you do on your phone. And actually, speaking of phones, Android literally uses the Linux kernel too. Underneath the hood, Linux is everywhere. But at the desktop level, as long as you pick an interface you like, everything else feels just like your old PC. The transition is incredibly seamless. So, we've laid the foundation, we've wired the house, and we've looked at all the amazing interior design options. You now know that Linux isn't just one scary monolithic thing, but a modular, totally customizable toolkit. So, I leave you with this final thought. Which puzzle pieces are you going to choose to build your perfect digital home? Don't be afraid to get out there, explore these different desktop environments, and find the one that fits you best. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Until next time, keep learning and keep exploring.